Welcome to another episode of Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture, and today we are going to do a love story, a comedy, because in 2024, as I'm recording this, it's almost Valentine's Day, and I figured what better way to do it than a fun romantic story. So I selected one of my favorite movies. It's a romantic comedy, The Princess Bride, and this movie is one of my absolute favorites. My friends and I would quote it all the time. I'm sure several people do because it's just really well known. This movie is just fantastic, and today I'm going to talk about the background, the casting, the production. I'll tell you my favorite scenes, and yes, we'll tell you some of my favorite lines. First of all, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I really would love to get my subscriber levels up. Please share the video with others that might subscribe as well. I'd love to get monetized. Also, like the video so it will help with the algorithms on YouTube. Also, want to give a plug to a couple of other things. So, first off, Carrie Ellis wrote a great book called As You Wish. This is a fantastic book. He talks about the filming of The Princess Bride, and he tells some really, really good stories in it. And you get a really good perspective of what it was like to film this movie. As I talk about it, you'll find that the cast was really close because they were together for a couple months filming it. And this is a really good book. And I know he's been on tour promoting the book. So if you can catch him or at least buy the book, it's really great. And then also the Blu-ray, 4K, or DVD. I have the DVD and the Blu-ray. I haven't gotten the 4K yet, but it's great. It's got all kinds of great special features, which tells you a little bit more about the film, has a few outtakes, and there are lots of funny stories that the cast members share about this wonderful movie. So without further ado, let's get into The Princess Bride. So Rob Reiner directed this movie, and he always wanted to do this movie. It was his number one thing. He tells a story that he got the book as a gift from his father, Carl Reiner, and ever since he read the book, he'd wanted to make the movie. And he got his big break making This Is Spinal Tap, which is a hilarious spoof movie in 1984. And that kind of got him in the director's seat and with the ability to be able to one day call his own shot and be able to film this movie. So finally, a couple years later, in 1986, during the production of Stand By Me, he spoke to an executive at Paramount, and he put in motion the movie for The Princess Bride. They put a little bit of a stop to it and hit the brakes on it because they told him, and interestingly enough, that they couldn't because so many other people had tried to adapt Goldman's works and weren't able to do it successfully and really actually make a movie out of it. So this was a challenge from day one to get everything on the ground, rolling, and done. So here are some of the previous attempts. So one of the first attempts, 20th Century Fox paid $500,000 right after the book came out in 1973, and Richard Lester was gonna sign. Yeah, the same Richard Lester who did, some great movies, and he was signed to direct, and it was almost made, but the head of production of Fox was fired, and there went the movie. Every time there's a big change at the top of a studio, you could have various movies that were greenlit get red lit. So unfortunately, it was done. Goldman had talked to others to bring about the rights to the film. He'd worked with other directors, including Francois Truffaut, who was a very, very, very famous French director. Robert Redford was interested in doing this. Norman Jewison, and at one point, Christopher Reeve said he was interested in being Wesley. I mean, could you imagine that? Superman himself wanting to play the role of Wesley. Very interesting. A very interesting topic. I can't believe that this movie took so long for them to really adapt into a screenplay because it's just a wonderful, great story. So Reiner was able to find success because he got support from his old boss, Norman Lear, who produced All in the Family and several other sitcoms. Unfortunately, he had recently passed away a few months ago, and just Norman Lear was fantastic. Really a credit to the industry. Made some amazing shows. But Reiner was able to get his support for this and help fund the production. Reiner worked closely with Goldman to adapt the book into a screenplay, and he acknowledged that then 20th Century Fox had also had a prominent role in the film's production as well. So they were interested in this production, and they basically told Reiner that they kind of wanted a new Wizard of Oz type movie. And, you know, The Wizard of Oz is such a classic movie. It's been around for several years, and I'd watched it all the time when it came on as a kid. So I can understand kind of the comparisons here. Studios were always looking for a Wizard of Oz type movie that would just come out on the big screen and then be something treasured for many, many years. And that's what they were going for with this movie. Let's get into the casting because it's rather interesting and there's some really, really good stories in this. So when we talk about casting, the first person we got to cast is Wesley, right? And Reiner was looking for a leading man, and he saw Cary Elwes in a performance called Lady Jane, and he was trying to get him, and he couldn't get a hold of him, and finally they had to meet in Germany because Cary was filming something in Germany. So they went out to Germany to talk and to try and get him to come and do this film. And Cary describes this, that he was in Germany, but there was a concern about being in Germany. At the time, East and West Germany were separated, and there was concern because Chernobyl had happened. And the concern about meeting Reiner in Germany and maybe possibly shooting in Europe was they didn't know at the time what the effects of that awful nuclear disaster in Chernobyl would have on Western Europe due to the winds and due to other things. So there's a real concern about sickness from that and other types of things, which you don't really get in any other place but Cary Elwes' book, and he tells you a lot more about that. So it's interesting. But Reiner really liked him, thought Elwes was perfect for the part, and that Elwes himself had read the book and really liked it, and this was a hero from his childhood. So he grew up with it, and he associated himself with the character Wesley. So he was a perfect fit. Robin Wright was selected for Buttercup, and she's not related to me. I wish she was, because she's a gorgeous actress, and she's just beautiful and perfect for the cast. She was cast late in the process, about a week before filming. They had auditioned a number of different actresses, but did not find their ideal Buttercup. And here are some of the actresses that they thought of. Uma Thurman. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's interesting. Meg Ryan. Wow, can you imagine Meg Ryan in this role? Sean Young. Oh my goodness. Gorgeous, especially in Blade Runner. Susie Amiss. Courtney Cox. That would have been interesting. Alexandra Paul. And even Whoopi Goldberg auditioned for it. Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg auditioned for it. She could have done it. Anyway, Wright's agent had heard about the casting and encouraged Wright to audition, and here's what happened. Here's the story. So Wright was impressed and with Reiner and Jenkins, but they invited Wright to come meet Goldman at his house. And when she showed up, she rang the doorbell, and Goldman answered the door, and literally as he opened the door, he said that Robin Wright was standing there in a summer dress, long blonde hair, and she looked as if she had a halo and a sign from heaven. She was backlit by the Lord and by just the natural beauty with the light, and Goldman was just sold on it as soon as he saw her. So fantastic story, wonderful story, and Robin Wright does a great job in this movie, and she's just so perfect as the Princess Bride, and she's so beautiful in it. Mandy Patinkin and Wallace Shawn were early choices for the cast. Shawn in particular was chosen as Vizzini due to his diminutive size and contrast of Physic, who's played by Andre the Giant. We'll get into that in a minute. But the other person that was considered for Vizzini was Danny DeVito. And the funny thing about it is when Wallace Shawn knew that Danny DeVito was being considered for the role, he basically decided, hey, there's no way I'm going to beat him out. I'm not even going to audition. But his his agent and several people convinced him to come back and read for the role, and he got it. So, which is great because I love Danny DeVito. I think he's a great actor, but Wallace Shawn is brilliant in this, and I love him. Yes, Inconceivable would be totally different if it came out of Danny DeVito's mouth, but Wallace Shawn is just perfect in this role. I love his acting, and the way he did everything was just amazing. All right, so Andre the Giant is interesting. So at the time, Andre the Giant was a wrestler, and that's how I knew him prior to this movie coming out. So at the time, they really couldn't get him because he was scheduled to go to Japan for a wrestling event. And the interesting thing, when William Goldman was writing this novel, he had actually thought of Andre the Giant for the role, which is fascinating because Andre eventually got cast. But Goldman's other choice for the role in prior plans for this movie before this one by Rob Reiner was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Can you imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger as Fezzik? I can't imagine him as Fezzik, but basically what had happened is Arnold had become a huge success by the time Rob Reiner got to make his, and so they really couldn't get Arnold to do it, and they were still trying to get Andre. They were trying to get other people in case they couldn't get him. So they looked at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a couple other people that were rather large men for the role of Fezzik. But as luck would turn out, Andre the Giant's match in Tokyo had been canceled, and he was able to do the film. And Andre was a little bit unsure at first because he'd been a wrestler, but he had never really acted before. So he was unsure joining the cast. And there are some amazing, heartwarming stories about Andre. Of course, we have since lost him because he had the gigantism disease, and unfortunately, that plays a toll on a person's body so much. And I'm just so glad that we got his wonderful performance in this movie. I don't think the film would be the same without Andre the Giant, and he's just done an amazing job acting in this movie. Another person that auditioned for this movie but kind of turned it down, that was considered, I don't know what role, but Liam Neeson was considered for this movie, and it'd be interesting to find out what role he played in this movie, or what role he was considered for. So we'll get into the production next. Okay, the production of this is fascinating. They filmed for several months in England, as I noted, but Rob Reiner had rented a house, and many of the cast would come over for dinner, and that's how they got to know each other. According to the cast, they became kind of like a family. And also, even the hotel, you had Christopher Guest and Jamie Lee Curtis, who he's married to, would also have people over to their hotel room, and they would make dinner and do different things and hang out. So this cast was smaller, and they got to know each other and became like almost a family for what they said. And they said that it really helped them improve their performances throughout the shooting of it. So there are a ton of funny stories. One of the funniest stories about shooting it and doing it were tales about Andre the Giant. So Andre the Giant, being a large man, could drink a lot of alcohol. And he loved a particular wine. And they said that he ordered a bunch of cases of this wine. And there were a couple of different things that he did with this. So Rob Reiner tells a story of a shot that they were going to do that was supposed to be at the end of the movie, where after Fred Savage says goodnight to his grandfather, he kind of looks out the window and sees all four of them on horseback waving to him. Well, Rob Reiner said that they were going to shoot that, and they had to shoot it from the background. And obviously, you can't. Andre the Giant is so big; he weighs over half a ton. They really couldn't fit him on a horse, and so he'd been drinking this new wine all day, and he was a little bit tipsy, and they're lowering him in a harness to kind of make it look like he's riding this horse, and he's being lowered down, and he's tipsy, not knowing what's going on. He waves to Reiner, and he says, "Hello, boss." I can't do his voice very well, but I just imagining him doing that is just hilarious. Billy Crystal tells another story, and Cary Elwes tells the same story of Andre the Giant drinking and passing out in the hotel lobby, and they the hotel attendants, they couldn't move him. They couldn't do anything because he's so big. Nobody could really carry him. So what they did was they wrapped him in one of their big rugs as a blanket and just let him be passed out on the floor in the hotel lobby. And what they did was they put railings around him so people would leave him alone, and he'd be able to sleep. And apparently the snoring was rather loud too. So it's just hilarious to hear those stories. Anyway, a key moment in this was Carrie Ellis and Mandy Patinkin spent a lot of time with their sword play. They learned how to fight and do sword play, both left-handed and right-handed, and neither one of them had previous experience fencing. So it was interesting how they trained. And the cool thing about that scene, which is one of my favorites that I'll come up and talk about, is that number one, it was the longest in history up at that time, but also they did almost all their stunts except for a few somersaults that were in there that they didn't do, but they did almost all of them, which is really cool and really interesting. Also, just so you know, in that scene, Wesley, Carrie Ellis, he tells a story in his book about hurting his toe. I won't reveal that story because I want you to read the book. It's a great story, but he was doing that whole fencing scene with the hurt toe. So very interesting stuff. Anyway, they spent a lot of time training for weeks, and they would even, Carrie Ellis talks about even when they would take breaks, he'd be working with his instructor so they got the sword play down. They said they got it down really good, and so they were able to do it fast paced. And so they did it for Rob Reiner, and he goes, "Great, but I want it a little bit longer. Go back and redo it." And they were like, "Oh my gosh, we must have done this way too fast." So they went and saw the film reels about the longest sword plays. They watched the movies from back in the day about longest sword fights, and then they made adjustments to it and made it into one of the longest sword fights ever on film, which is great. It's fantastic. This sword fight it's just one of the most amazing, hilarious, fun scenes in the entire film. Billy Crystal and Carol Kane spent time before traveling to England to work out the backstory between Miracle Max and his wife, and they developed such a rapport for their characters that once on set, Reiner allowed them to improvise, and you could tell. Carol Kane is hilarious. She was great in Scrooge. She improvised a lot of her stuff. Billy Crystal is one of the best comedians ever, and the way that those two are coupled together in this movie is just brilliant. It's just a funny scene. It's one of my favorites in the whole movie, which is just amazing. Another thing about the production, the scene where they're climbing the cliffs of insanity, and Andre the Giant is carrying all those people. Well, Andre the Giant had back problems, and they really couldn't put people on him like that. So what they had was an electric lift, and they would be cranking it up as Andre was putting his hands on the rope, and each of the passengers was on little bicycle seats harnessed to him. So he really wasn't carrying any weight on his back to keep him safe, and they were able to do that. And Wallace Shawn apparently was very scared of heights, and what had happened is he basically freaked out and was saying that, "Hey, I'm going to ruin this whole picture because I'm afraid of heights. I'm going to, it's going to be bad for us." And Andre the Giant apparently put his hand on his head and said, "Don't worry, I've got you. You'll be okay. I'm here. And it really calmed him down. And apparently, calming him down helped out with the shot of that scene, and they were able to do it, which is really cool. Really love that story. That's from the DVD, Blu-ray. If you get a chance, definitely the special features are worth checking out because there's some heartwarming stories like that one. So great stuff here. Well, let's talk a little bit about my favorite scenes. I'll tell you a little bit about seeing this movie, and I'll quote a few lines, and we'll wrap it up. Okay, so this being one of my favorite movies, I've got a lot of favorite scenes in it, and I've got a lot of favorite lines. But let me tell you the story of seeing this movie, because If you know me, you'll know that I remember some odd things. I have a weird memory that allows me to remember stuff. So, um, one of the things my family would always like to do on the weekends is go eat Tex Mex food. We love it. And what we did was we went to go eat at our favorite Tex Mex restaurant. And it was rather busy that night. And I went to put our name down. It was my brother, my mom, my dad, and me. And so I put the name down, right party of four. And so I put it down and we went over to the bar area where we could get chips and Cokes and stuff like that. And my parents could get margaritas. And we could just chill out while waiting to get our table and eat. Anyway, after about 15 minutes, I decided to just see where we were on the wait list. And I go and ask the person, and she's like, "Oh, you guys are next." And so we go up and we get our table and we eat, and lo and behold, as we're walking out after we're eating, we were surprised that we got a table so quickly. But as we were going out, we found out that we weren't the only right party of four that was on the list, and we had actually leapfrogged somebody else who was also right party of the four. So funny story. So that allowed us to get out a little bit earlier and see an earlier showing of this movie. And I just remember that fact associating with this movie. So pretty cool. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about my favorite scenes, of which there are several. It's hard to really tell which one's your favorite. Most of these considered are because of the lines, but we'll give it a shot. I've got my top six here. Yeah, top six. Or actually seven. Top seven, actually. I had to add one or two at the end because, oh my gosh, there's so much. So I love the play with Peter Falk and Fred Savage. Peter Falk is excellent as the grandfather in this, and Fred Savage, this is one of his first movies. And first of all, the sad thing is I can name almost every toy in his room, and I can even name the baseball game that he's playing on the computer. Yes, I'm sad. I know a lot of stupid stuff, but you don't want to hear that. You want to hear about the scene. Anyway, I love when he starts to read the story to the boy, and the boy goes, "Is this a kissing book?" The whole dynamic about it being a kissing book is just hilarious, and it plays out at the very end. And I thought that just was a fun thing, because me being about Kevin's age, when I saw this movie, at first when I saw it and he said that, I laughed because I was thinking, oh, great, is this going to be a kissing story? Anyway, so yeah, that's number seven. Number six, we quote this all the time, one of my friends and I, is the scene where he introduced Buttercup as their queen, that the king had died and she's now going to be the queen, and she's being introduced, and the old lady goes, "Boo, boo," reminds her of her true love in the fire swamp, and it turns out to be a dream, and the boy goes, "See, didn't I tell you she wasn't going to marry Humperdinck?" And Peter Falk's character goes, "Yes, you're very smart. Now shut up." I just love that scene, especially we quote the "boo, boo" all the time. It's just hilarious. Very hilarious scene. Okay, that was number six. Number five is probably the most quoted line from this entire movie, besides "As You Wish." It's the scene with Indigo and his sword fight with Count Rugen, the six-fingered man, where he tells the line, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And I love the sword fight scene. It's got a lot of back and forth with it. One of the interesting things about it is that Mandy Patinkin actually did stab Christopher Guest during this time, and he had to tell him, "Mandy, don't stab me for real. You're supposed to fake it. You know, we're filming a movie. This is not real life." But Mandy Patinkin said that this movie was very personal to him because he had recently lost his father. And part of the role as in Indigo was that he was really getting redemption for the cancer that had killed his father. So he said that this movie was not only one in a million roles for him, but he also said that this movie was kind of therapy for him. And part of that scene was him uh, getting revenge on the cancer and getting rid of that, so his father kind of lived for the moment in his mind. And it's really interesting to hear him talk about this. Very, very great story and very interesting scene. Christopher Guest didn't really like being on the receiving end in some of that, but it was interesting. Also, another rumor that I heard, I can't confirm it because I only heard it one place, is that apparently when Count Rugen first hears that, and before he takes off running, he has a bit of gas, and there was supposed to be a fart joke there. So glad they didn't film it. I don't know if that would have been appropriate, but it's funny to think about. That was a cut scene. All right, so my next scene, number 4, is on the way while they're in the boat taking the princess, and even the climb up the cliffs of insanity. Just the back and forth between Fezzik, Indigo, and Vicini is just hilarious. Fezzik, are there rocks ahead? If there are, well, she'll be dead. No more rhymes now, I mean it. Anybody want a peanut? Just love those lines. And then when they're climbing up the rope, he's like, I'll just have to get a new giant. Well, he's carrying, a single person. I'm carrying 4 people. And the whole inconceivable. He didn't fall. Inconceivable. So it's hilarious. I love it. Those 3 actors were brilliantly cast. That whole set of scenes all together is some of the funniest parts of this movie and some of my favorite. It's just a lot of fun. My next favorite is getting into the nitty gritty of the specifics. Vicini versus Wesley in the fight to the death. It's just hilarious. It's just so many wonderful lines there. By all means, if you want her dead, come closer. The most important thing, never start a land war in Asia, but the only thing slightly different is never go against a Sicilian when death is on the line. And then the whole iocane powder and the switching of the cups, which if you watch that scene, the funny thing is that Vicini kind of is right in a way because you can't really trust either cup, and you find out that both were poisoned. But he then makes a switch, and the results happen how they happen. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but if you haven't seen it, please do before watching the rest of this. I mean, gosh, I'm describing scenes already. All right, my top 2. All right, so number 2 is the sword fight. It is just fantastic. It's a brilliantly choreographed sword fight. I love the lines. Him getting to the top is just great. And then when he gets to the top, Wesley's taking the rocks out of his shoe. And Indigo asks him, I don't mean to pry, but do you happen to have 6 fingers on your right hand? And Wesley's response is, do you always begin conversations this way? And he shows him, and he tells him the story, which you get to know a little bit more about Indigo, and he shows him the sword, and it's supposed to be 2 masters fighting, and they pull it off great. And I love the whole, I am not left-handed. And then Wesley later on goes, well, I know something you don't know either. I'm not left-handed either. And then they start fighting right-handed. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. They put a lot of work into it, and it just comes across great. It's just brilliant. Love that scene. But my favorite scene in the whole movie has to be when they go to Miracle Max. Billy Crystal cracks me up. And actually, filming that scene, Mandy Patinkin actually hurt his ribs. And the reason why he hurt his ribs is that he was holding back laughing at Billy Crystal and all the wonderful lines that Miracle Max says. Nothing is good except for a nice mutton, lettuce, and tomato. Or the mutton is nice and lean. And just mostly dead, slightly alive. Have fun storming the castle. It's just brilliant. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. Just so much fun at Miracle Max's. The other thing about those scenes is that apparently Rob Reiner would be there, and then he'd tell them, okay, start the scene, and he'd walk out because Rob Reiner couldn't control his laughter at that either. So just a lot of fun. So this is The Princess Bride. Those are my favorite scenes. Tell me what your favorite scenes are in this great movie. What did you like? Is this one of your favorite movies? Let me know in the comments below. Let's share our memories of this wonderful, wonderful movie, and we'll catch you on the next Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture.